Now, in your book, The Injustice Never Leaves You, you talked about Puerto Rivera, Texas, and an incident there with the Texas Rangers and the US military. Tell us real quickly what happened and what was the result.
The Bois Bonito massacre took place in January 1918. It's a devastating case of extralegal violence. Most people, when they think about racial violence in the United States, they tend to think about lynchings of African Americans, and they tend to think about violence in the South. This is an example of racist violence by Texas Rangers, the state police in Texas, in the early 20th century in 1918. It's an example of Texas Rangers and US soldiers in West Texas visiting an isolated ranching community, waking the families up in the middle of the night and separating 15 men and boys from their loved ones. They were taken into Texas Ranger custody, and without due process, without investigations, they were massacred by the Texas Rangers. And so this is a devastating example, not only because of the gross violence, but also because despite the witnesses, the families themselves, the survivors, or the US soldiers that witnessed this act, there were no prosecutions. And so it's an example of where you see a state investigating the event, the US government investigating the event, the Mexican government investigating the event, because the survivors called for justice. And despite all of the evidence that was revealed that this was a massacre by the Texas Rangers, there were no prosecutions. And so this is one of those examples of an example of racist violence that most people don't know happened, but it has shaped our understanding of places of the border. These were Mexican nationals in a context when anybody who looked Mexican was being what we would call today racially profiled as a threat, as un-American, and so we have to learn about the consequences of racist rhetoric and how it can lead to violence. This is also, the Bois Bonito massacre did come to more popular attention in the aftermath of the El Paso shooting in 2019, because people were learning, about anti-Latinx violence and how it has persisted. And actually over the past few years, how it has been increasing. Anti-Latinx hate crimes have been increasing, but Americans didn't really know even the history of Latinos in the United States, much less the history of anti-Latinx or anti-Mexican violence. And so it takes people really trying to learn just basic information about the history of the border, the history of Mexican Americans in places like West Texas, to be able to understand how it is that such an injustice could happen with complete impunity.